There was a bowl of black caviar on the table, about 10 pounds of it, maybe more. Next to it, bottles of French cognac worth thousands of dollars. And around that table, naked women were dancing, about 30 of them. The generals sat there stone-faced, afraid to even blink. Kim Jong-il leaned back in his chair, took a sip from his glass, and smiled. Then he snapped his fingers and said, "Now let the generals dance with them. But if anyone touches them, he's a thief, and we punish thieves." I stood by the wall, holding a tray, thinking about one thing only. Don't drop it. Because in Kim's palace, you could get executed for breaking a plate. The man whose memories form the basis of this video spent nearly 20 years at Kim Jong-il's side. He wasn't a general, a minister, or a party official. He was a chef. An ordinary chef who made sushi. But that's exactly why he learned more about the North Korean dictator than the CIA ever knew. More than the leader's closest allies knew. Because he was right there with Kim in those moments when the great leader took off his mask and became his true self. A spoiled, pleasure-hungry man who spent millions on food and women, while his people starved to death. Several years ago, this man escaped from North Korea and wrote a book that shocked the world. Today, we're going to tell his story. The story of how a simple Japanese chef ended up at the heart of one of the most brutal regimes on the planet and witnessed things he wasn't allowed to speak about under penalty of death. Fair warning, what you're about to hear may shock you. If you're ready to learn the truth about the secret life of North Korea's dictator, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Let's begin. In the early 1980s, North Korea's leadership faced an unusual problem. Kim Jong-il, who was already effectively running the country while his aging father held nominal power, wanted to eat authentic Japanese sushi. Not some Korean imitation, but the real thing, the kind served in Tokyo's finest restaurants. The problem was that finding a skilled Japanese chef willing to voluntarily move to North Korea was virtually impossible. Who in their right mind would agree to that? But North Korean intelligence services had their methods. They needed someone with a specific set of qualities. First, he had to be an excellent professional. Kim Jong-il didn't tolerate mediocrity when it came to food. Second, he had to be completely apolitical. No connections to journalists, human rights activists, or intelligence agencies. And third, and this was the most important part, he had to be, as cynical as it sounds, reliably corruptible. Someone who could be bought and wouldn't ask too many questions. And they found the perfect candidate. His name was Kenji Fujimoto. He was in his early 30s, working as a sushi chef at a Tokyo restaurant, and drowning in debt. Gambling debts, alcohol, expensive women. Fujimoto burned through money faster than he could earn it. He was talented, but completely incapable of living a normal life. The perfect candidate for recruitment. When North Korean agents approached him with a job offer, Fujimoto didn't think twice. They offered him $2,500 a month, $30,000 a year. For comparison, the average American at the time earned about $11,000. For a broke chef from Tokyo, this was life-changing money. He understood that North Korea was a strange and dangerous place. He suspected it might be a one-way ticket, but greed proved stronger than fear. Fujimoto packed up his knives and headed to Pyongyang, not knowing that the next 20 years of his life would become something between a gilded cage and a horror movie. The first few months in Pyongyang went relatively smoothly. Fujimoto worked at an upscale Japanese restaurant that served high-ranking officials and foreign businessmen. His salary arrived on time, living conditions were decent enough. He started thinking maybe things weren't so bad after all. And then, late one night, there was a knock at his door. A man in civilian clothes stood on the threshold. Without explanation, without warning, he ordered Fujimoto to gather his best ingredients and tools and be ready immediately. They blindfolded the chef, shoved him into a car, and drove him somewhere. The journey lasted several hours. When they finally removed the blindfold, Fujimoto found himself in a place he could only describe as a palace. Marble, gold trim, crystal chandeliers, carpets so thick your feet sank into them. He had never seen anything like it, not in Japan, not anywhere. In the enormous hall sat about 20 men in military uniforms and formal suits. They all sat in silence, watching an unremarkable, pudgy man with a perm who sat at the head of the table. This man looked at Fujimoto and casually said, "Make me some toro." Fujimoto was stunned. Toro, the belly of bluefin tuna, the most expensive and exquisite part of the fish. Most people, even wealthy ones, don't even know this delicacy exists. In North Korea, where ordinary officials considered themselves lucky to try regular salmon, only someone who had dined at the world's finest restaurants would know about toro. In that moment, Fujimoto understood. This was no ordinary official. This was someone from the very top of the power structure. He prepared the sushi, pouring all his skill into the work. The man tasted it, nodded approvingly, and told him to keep going. Fujimoto prepared and served, prepared and served. About 20 portions of toro disappeared one after another. Finally, the man leaned back, sighed with satisfaction, and handed the chef an envelope. Back home, Fujimoto opened it and found 50,000 yen inside, about $300. A tip for one dinner. More than he earned in a week back in Tokyo. The next morning, Fujimoto unfolded the newspaper and saw a familiar face on the front page. That unremarkable man with the perm turned out to be Kim Jong-il, son of the great leader and future ruler of North Korea. That meeting changed everything. Fujimoto had made an impression on Kim Jong-il, and soon came more summons to the palace. With each visit, the chef learned more about his master, and what he learned was beyond imagination. Kim Jong-il lived in an inverted world. He woke up around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, spent a few hours on business, mostly reviewing reports and watching foreign films, which he loved. And real life began after midnight. Palace banquets started at 2 or 3 in the morning and continued until dawn. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was his daily routine for decades. After several years working at the restaurant, Fujimoto received an incredible promotion. He became Kim Jong-il's personal chef. Now he was at the dictator's side almost constantly. They ate together, went to the sauna together, partied together. Fujimoto transformed from a simple chef into something like the leader's companion. Why did Kim bring an ordinary Japanese chef into his inner circle? The answer is simple, yet sad. A dictator's life is a life of absolute loneliness. Kim Jong-il couldn't trust anyone. Any general could be a conspirator, any minister a potential traitor. Everyone around him either feared him to death or was trying to use him for their own career advancement. But Fujimoto was different. He didn't understand Korean well enough to plot intrigues. He had no interest in politics. He just wanted to cook good food, get paid, and enjoy life. This made him the ideal companion. someone Kim could relax around and be himself with. Besides, they turned out to be surprisingly similar. Both loved gambling, alcohol, and women. Both were, as Fujimoto himself put it in his book, degenerates in a sense.
The dictator and the chef had found kindred spirits in each other. Now let's talk about what exactly Fujimoto cooked for his master. Because Kim Jong-il's culinary demands are a story of madness unto themselves. Let's start with rice. What could possibly be special about rice? But for the leader's table, rice was grown on special fields under the supervision of agronomists. And then, and this is not a joke, each grain was inspected by hand. Specially trained staff rejected grains of improper shape or size. Only perfect grains made it onto the great leader's plate. Fish was flown in from Japan by plane, and it had to be alive. Kim believed dead fish lost its flavor. Fujimoto personally flew to Tokyo for sea urchins, tuna, and other delicacies. Each trip cost tens of thousands of dollars, and this was a completely routine expense. The regular menu included live octopus served still squirming, shark fins, sea cucumbers, beluga caviar from Iran. Wines were exclusively French, from the finest cellars. Hennessy cognac was purchased in such quantities that Kim Jong-il became one of the largest private importers of the brand in the world. By some estimates, he spent about $800,000 on alcohol annually. Fujimoto recalls that for each banquet, they prepared 5 to 6 times more food than the guests could possibly eat. Protocol demanded it. The leader must never see empty plates on the table. After each banquet, everything untouched went straight to the garbage. Once, Fujimoto watched with his own eyes as an entire bowl of black caviar was thrown away. No one had even gotten around to trying it. But the most striking thing wasn't the quantity of food. It was the context in which all this happened. In the 1990s, while Fujimoto was preparing his exquisite dishes, North Korea was experiencing a devastating famine. By various estimates, between several 100,000 and 3 million people died of starvation. People ate grass, tree bark, caught rats. In some areas, there were documented cases of cannibalism. And during all this, Kim Jong-il's dogs were eating choice beef prepared by personal chefs. Friends, I want you to stop for a second and really grasp this contrast. Tons of delicacies going into the trash and millions of people dying of hunger just a few miles from the palace. Did Kim know what was happening? Absolutely. Did it bother him? Apparently, not for a second. Write in the comments, do you think it's even possible to remain human while living in such monstrous luxury, surrounded by an ocean of suffering? But food was only part of the picture. The real madness began after dinner. Kim Jong-il had several passions beyond gastronomy: gambling, alcohol, racing, and women. Fujimoto became a participant in all of these activities, partly because the dictator needed a companion, partly because he turned out to be the only person in the leader's circle who actually knew how to do any of this stuff. Take gambling, for example. Kim Jong-il loved poker and blackjack. The problem was that none of his generals had any idea how to play. Most of them had never left Pyongyang and had only seen casinos in movies. But Fujimoto, a seasoned gambler who had blown a fortune in Tokyo's gambling houses, knew all the rules and all the tricks. So every time the leader wanted to play a hand, they called for the chef. Same deal with motorcycles and jet skis. Kim Jong-il loved speed. He had a collection of Yamaha motorcycles and loved racing around his residences, but none of his inner circle knew how to ride except Fujimoto, who not only knew how, but could also tune the machines for better performance. Fujimoto tells an amusing story about jet ski racing. Usually, everyone let the leader win. Losing to the great leader could potentially mean execution.
But Kim hated when people obviously threw the race. It took all the fun out of it.
Fujimoto figured this out, and once took a risk. He beat Kim by half a length. Just barely, not humiliatingly, but enough to create some real competition. The dictator's reaction was unexpected. He was thrilled. "No one's ever made me work that hard before," he shouted after the race. For the next 2 weeks, Kim thought of nothing but a rematch. He even ordered the most powerful jet skis in the world from abroad to guarantee victory next time. This story says a lot about the psychology of a dictator. A man who could order anyone killed, who held an entire country in fear, desperately wanted one thing: to be treated like a normal person, to have someone give him real competition, to earn his victories, not have them handed to him. And Fujimoto, whether by accident or intuition, gave him exactly that. Now for what Fujimoto was reluctant to talk about for a long time: the women. In North Korea, there's an organization unofficially called Kipumjo, the Pleasure Brigades. These are groups of young women selected from across the country to service the top leadership. For a long time, their existence remained rumor, urban legend. Fujimoto became one of the first to confirm it. The brigades are real. He saw them with his own eyes. At palace banquets, dozens of young, beautiful women were regularly present, all roughly the same age, all impeccably dressed, all wearing identical mechanical smiles. They sang, danced, entertained the guests. But that was just the official part of the program. Fujimoto describes one evening that was seared into his memory forever. The banquet was proceeding normally, tables groaning with delicacies, generals raising toasts to the leader's health, wine flowing like water. On the tables sat bowls of black caviar, bottles of cognac worth thousands of dollars. At some point, Kim Jong-il, having drunk quite a bit, clapped his hands and shouted, "Girls, take off your clothes." The women obediently stripped down to their underwear. "Take off everything," Kim commanded. And they did. 30 young women stood completely naked in the middle of the banquet hall while the generals kept stone faces, pretending nothing unusual was happening. But then it got even crazier. Kim Jong-il ordered the generals to stand up and dance with the naked women. But he set a rule: no touching. Anyone who touched a woman would be declared a thief, and thieves get punished. Fujimoto remembers this scene as a surrealist nightmare. Elderly military commanders, decorated with medals, war heroes, awkwardly shuffling around next to naked young women, desperately trying not to accidentally brush against them. Everyone was drenched in sweat from the tension, and Kim sat in his chair, sipping cognac, watching it all unfold with a satisfied smile. This was a demonstration of absolute power, not a sexual orgy, or rather, not just that. It was a reminder to everyone present: I can make you do anything. You are all my puppets, the generals and the women alike. After the public portion of the evening, select guests moved to private rooms. What happened there, Fujimoto describes sparingly. Perhaps there are things he doesn't want to talk about even years later. But his hints make it clear. The girls from the brigades weren't just dancers and singers. They were property of the regime. Their bodies belonged to the party and personally to the great leader. Fujimoto lived in North Korea for nearly 20 years. He became an insider at the palace, valued, well paid. But with each passing year, he understood more clearly: he was trapped. Leaving North Korea voluntarily was virtually impossible. Those who knew too much, and Fujimoto knew a lot, had no right to leave. The risk that they would talk was too great. The chef understood. Sooner or later, he would either die here of old age
or be eliminated when he was no longer useful.
Several times he managed to travel abroad on errands for the leader Enye to get delicacies, special ingredients. Each time, agents accompanied him. Each time, he came back. But in 2001, during one of these trips, Fujimoto took a desperate step. He escaped. He still won't reveal the details of his escape, Enye perhaps to protect those who helped him. But the fact remains. Kim Jong-il's former personal chef found himself free and soon began giving interviews, then wrote a book that became a sensation. For the first time, the world learned the details of the North Korean dictator's private life from a first-hand source. Not from CIA analysts, not from defecting officials, but from a man who stood beside the leader for 20 years and saw everything with his own eyes. Fujimoto's story didn't end there. After publishing his book, he became an enemy of the North Korean regime. There were several reports of attempts on his life. He lived constantly changing addresses, avoiding publicity, wary of every unfamiliar face. But in 2012, something incredible happened. Kim Jong-il died in 2011, and power passed to his youngest son, Enye, Kim Jong-un. The same boy Fujimoto remembered as a child. The chef had once taught him to ski and played with him in the palace. And now, the new leader of North Korea sent Fujimoto an invitation to return. It was insane. A man who had escaped the regime, written an exposé, become a traitor in the eyes of the state, Enye, and they're inviting him back? Any sane person would have refused, but Fujimoto accepted. He returned to Pyongyang, met with Kim Jong-un, spent several weeks there, Enye, and left again. Alive. No one knows what they discussed. No one knows what agreements were reached. But the very fact that the regime spared a defector speaks volumes. Perhaps Kim Jong-un had retained fond memories of his childhood friend. Perhaps he simply needed someone who knew his father better than anyone else. Or perhaps, nay, and this is the most terrifying possibility, then the regime wanted to send a message. We can reach anyone, anywhere, anytime, even if we've decided to let you live for now. Fujimoto is still alive today. He continues to give interviews, though he speaks more carefully than before. Perhaps returning to North Korea changed him. Perhaps he understood something that made him keep the darkest secrets to himself. Or maybe they simply reminded him, even on the other side of the world, no one is safe from the long arm of the Pyongyang regime. Kenji Fujimoto's story is the story of a man who accidentally found himself at the epicenter of one of the most terrible dictatorships of our time. He wasn't a hero or a freedom fighter. He was an ordinary person with his own weaknesses who ended up somewhere he would have been better off never going. But it's precisely his ordinariness that makes his testimony so valuable. He didn't look at Kim Jong-il through the eyes of a politician or a spy. He looked through the eyes of someone just trying to survive and make some money. And what he saw tells us more about the North Korean regime than any analytical report ever could. As you watch this video, the Kim dynasty continues to rule North Korea. Kim Jong-un lives in the same palaces, eats the same delicacies, entertains himself the same ways his father did. The Pleasure Brigades still exist. The banquets continue. The caviar keeps going in the trash. And beyond the palace walls, the same hungry, impoverished, terrified country. 25 million people locked in a giant prison. And the world still looks the other way.